Hello, one and all. Welcome to our Tuesday Times Roundtable. Today is Tuesday. Yes, that's the only way I know what day of the week it is if it's our Tuesday Times Roundtable, I know that it's Tuesday. So good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday Times Roundtable, where each week we engage in conversation around current global issues and trends that are of interest to you, our FIU students and family. Our weekly Tuesday Times Roundtable is made possible through a generous partnership through the New York Times. And so the link is here. I don't know if it's in the chat. And you should find cards around that has that. You'll just kind of follow the instructions here and set up your complimentary account linked to FIU. And that gives you full access to all of the articles online. So I'm Anna Prado, Graduate Assistant for the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. With me are my colleague, Sherry Beeson, who is your regular Tuesday Times Roundtable. I promise she'll be back next week. I just wanted to introduce our fine speakers today. And Michelle Zaldivar, the program coordinator with whom there would be no Zoom. So those of you who are joining us virtually, please thank her. Those of you who like to be able to access the archived recordings, also please thank her, because I wouldn't know how to do that either. So together we want to welcome you to today's session, whether you're here live and in person, whether you're joining us on Zoom, or whether you're watching our recording after we've already left the building. We are glad that you're here joining us. If you are joining us as a Global Learning Medallion student, you can earn 1 point for today's session. Don't know what a Global Learning Medallion student is? You can ask us. So if you're interested in learning more about the kinds of student-facing activities through the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, please see us after the event and speak to Sherry, Michelle, or myself, and we'll talk about all the exciting things we can do with you. Later during your session, we will be taking your questions. If you're joining us virtually, you can post your questions in the chat, and the lovely Michelle will be monitoring that for you. Otherwise, Sherry and I will be walking around with microphones like we were in a talk show, and we'll get you guys on film asking your questions. So now it is my pleasure to introduce today's guests. And they're standing before you, but I still wanted to put their pictures in there because it's excellent. Sorry. Okay, so we're recording now, sorry. So we're going to start with Dr. Asher Milbauer. He's a professor of English at FIU, where he has taught since 1981. He has been department chair, head faculty advisor, director of graduate studies, and founded the Exile studies program that I understand many of you are involved in right now. He regularly teaches courses in exile and immigrant literature and literature, language, and society. He's currently working on projects associated with exile literature and transgenerational legacies as reflected in the works of second and third generation descendants of Holocaust survivors. And while Dr. Milbauer is on sabbatical, he's probably working harder than he ever did before, because that's how he does sabbaticals. Dr. Milbauer is the chair of the Exile Studies Committee and is affiliated with the Global Jewish Studies Program. He is currently working on projects associated with exile literature. So next we see Dr. Jamie Sutton in his favorite element. He is surrounded by good buildings, which is where he likes to be if you know him well. Dr. Sutton is an associate professor of English and, like Dr. Milbauer, has also served as head advisor and department chair. He has taught at FIU since 1994 and is typically at home in discourses about classical, medieval, or Renaissance texts, especially those from that Shakespeare guy you may have heard of. You can often find him nerding out about spaces and architecture, and I know because I've been in his classes before that he tells you that he nerds out about spaces and architecture, and he really does. So in July of 2020, Drs. Milbauer and Sutton published their co-edited book, Exile in Global Literature and Culture, Homes Found and Lost with Routledge, and that's part of what they're going to be talking about today, as well as the Exile Studies program. So please join me in welcoming warmly Drs. Asher Milbauer, Dr. James Sutton, to our TTR.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'll start, Jamie.
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good. And first of all, I would like to thank the Global Learning Division and Ms. Beeson, who I had the pleasure to be instructed by. She kindly and gently put me through the process of being certified in teaching global learning classes, and she was very good and inspiring. And very often when we talked, we just talked about many other things and enjoyed the conversation. I also want to thank Anna. Anna, I know for many years, has been a student of mine, and not only just a student, but a premier student who is now doing her doctorate. And I know from what I remember about our collaboration as professor and teacher, you will be a very successful person. So thank you so much. And thank you, Michelle, for facilitating this gathering.
May I?
Of course.
This is how we roll. Professor Milbauer and I we've worked together so much that when he says something, I'm like, I would like to add.
We're almost married,
Thank you. Yes, we are. We're virtually married. Thankfully, our wives know each other well, and they're okay with that. But I would like to thank Sherry as well for the same reasons for bringing me into the global learning community last year when I taught Global Shakespeare's. I want to welcome Michelle to FIU. A little story about Michelle. Michelle was my student back in 2011 and 2012. She went to Stratford and London with me on a Shakespeare Study Abroad program. She was fantastic and completed her degree after that in a combination of English and business, correct? And then from there, she went and she taught in the Miami-Dade Public Schools for about 10 years. Her last assignment was at Coral Gables Senior High School, which just happened to be the school where my oldest son attended. So in this lovely sort of symbiosis, my student became the teacher of my son and did a marvelous job at that. And Michelle and I remained in touch for almost the whole time you were at CGHS. And so when I heard from her last year that for a number of reasons she felt like it was time to come back to the university environment, I was happy to help her out with that. And global learning, international education is her bailiwick. And so welcome back, Michelle. And Ms. Prado, Anna, same story. My student back in the 1990s and in the 2000s, and then went off as a teacher and a professional herself at a number of institutions, including, if I may say so, Jill Biden's institution, Northern Virginia Community College, for 3 or 4 years, I believe you were there. And now she too is back at FIU. So I thank all three of them, but I also point out, especially with Michelle and Anna, which is this: once you're a student in Exile Studies in the English department for a year or 2 or 3, you might become a lifer. I might be talking about Nick Cabezas in 5 or 10 years when he comes back, or we will keep track of you. This is I think in Exile Studies and in global learning generally, the relationship between faculty and students and that which binds us, which is education, books, ideas. At least I believe this, and I think Dr. Milbauer does, is much greater than the simple transaction that occurs in the classroom. And it lasts much longer too. That is part of our pitch. And Michelle and Anna are living proof. Are they not?
Yes.
Thank you. Back to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm really pleased to see so many familiar faces. And what I have to say might be redundant to some of the students or obvious to them because they are in the program of Exile Studies and they've studied with me some 2 courses, one after another, the foundational courses. So, but we are in a different situation today, almost exiled, but nevertheless, I really appreciate your presence, appreciate you coming out, and even though you know what you will be hearing here, you still came to support us, Dr. Sutton and I. So today's event basically is an event that is a two-part event. One will talk about the exile studies and its genesis and the kind of themes that we are pursuing there. And the second part has to do with what we have done with Dr. Sutton together, although we built a program together too, but collaborated on the book Exile in Global Literature and Culture. So I will talk a little bit about, about the main thrust, the mission of the program, and walk you through a number of slides. And Dr. Sutton will certainly contribute, I know, handsomely. We always have dialogues and work together very well. So
We are at the point now where we finish each other's sentences. When
right.
we were writing our book together, I would have an idea, and Dr. Milbauer would finish, quite literally, my sentence.
Along with a nice bottle of wine.
Yes, that,
So,
indeed.
you know, the sentence gets longer, but it's okay. At any rate, the publication we are presenting today, that is the book as part of the event, is in fact an extension of the Exile Studies program I initiated 11 years ago. Jamie Sutton was the chair of the English department at the time, while I served as the director of the graduate studies program. For many years during my tenure at FIU, I was teaching courses in exile literature, publishing in the field of exile studies, and inviting many notable scholars and writers to come to FIU and lecture on topics related to exile. Witnessing an ever-growing interest in exile literature by both students and faculty, I approached Dr. Sutton and suggested, and that was 12 years ago, that given the life experiences of our students, many were either immigrants or children of immigrants, and the unique nature of Miami as a city of exile, a kibbutz galuyot, it's a Hebrew concept, and biblical concept of ingathering of exiles, kibbutz galuyot, the time might have arrived to formalize our activities and create an academic, curricular-driven program with an exile study certificate at its core. I told Dr. Sutton that anchoring the certificate in literary studies makes perfect sense, for literature, unlike other academic fields, particularizes rather than universalizes the mysteries of the human condition, providing thus grounds for entry into the realm of otherness and assisting readers/students in gaining a clear understanding of self and the world. The Exile Studies program, anchored in literary studies, was meant to, I told Dr. Sutton, was meant to give our students a nuanced understanding of how cultural identity, issues of displacement, the state of in-betweenness liminality, that is, alienation, and the unique status of exile shaped fundamental human experiences.
Can I interject one moment? I think that word that Dr. Milbauer just used, nuanced, is terribly important in today's moment. I would like to say what Dr. Milbauer does in his classrooms, what I try to do in my classroom, what our colleagues who teach exile studies, we believe, try to do in their classrooms with you, is develop that sense of nuance, of surprise, of uncertainty before the text. Not absolute certainty, not conviction, but questioning. I think that's
yeah.
There are so many words that I could pick out from what you're saying, Dr. Milbauer, but I think that idea of nuance is particularly important, not only in the work that we do, but in the moment that we're teaching in as well.
Thank you, and I appreciate the annotation. It makes a great deal of sense. So please come in whenever you want. Interruptions of these kinds, I am welcoming. Students, I told further Dr. Sutton, will explore in our courses different definitions of exile, be it forced, voluntary, or inner slash, where am I? Okay, hold on one second. Inner slash internal, and learn how to differentiate between a variety of terms, refugee, expatriate, immigrant among them, that are similarly associated with loss, nostalgia, pain, dispossession, and dislocation. The study of exile I further elaborated will lead to an understanding of the tensions between a purist approach to exile as forceful, violent banishment from one's native land as a result of intolerance, and that exile as a metaphor for all kinds of alienations, societal estrangement, and psychic dislocations.
And if I can jump in there again, just to emphasize what I just heard Dr. Milbauer say. The pure definition of exile is that sort of forced, literal leaving of one's home, which many of you, either yourselves or your parents or your grandparents, have experienced. But this is a program that looks at that kind of exile as it's depicted in literature, but also, because it's grounded in literature, metaphors of exile, other ways of conveying and experiencing exile that may go beyond the pure definition and broaden out to a wider audience of readers, students, and the like.
Right. So anyway, again, thank you for elaborating. And in fact, when we had different scholars coming in, national scholars, international scholars, a number of them debated this kind of a wider implication of exile. But our answer to that was that exile in fact is a unique experience, but it has universal implications. So talking about exile in terms of metaphor makes a great sense to me as well, and to my students too. After teaching a number of years exile studies, I see that the students really understand the kind of implications that exile is projecting.
And if I may once again, unique, which makes exile personal, deeply felt, part of one's identity. Universal, asking the individual who considers themselves an exile to look towards the other, to look beyond themselves, maybe through metaphor, to find that comparable, similar experience in another, unique and yet universal, individual and the other.
And again, thank you, again, in an effort to make a strong case to my chair of the necessity and feasibility of creating an exile studies program, I further elaborated, telling him that given the nature and the demographic environment of Miami, and I stress Miami already the second time here because this is a city of exile, we live here. So given the demographic environment of Miami, the consequences of studying the exilic condition are far-reaching. Not only will the students be exposed to fine works of art, but they will also acquire a fresh perception of a city that is largely made up of transplants. And that is important, we live here. The diversity of our community is natural. It's not engineered in a way. It's natural. People come because they want to come or because they have to come. They settle in different neighborhoods, whatever fits them, or sometimes it doesn't fit them, but they find themselves in those communities. So it's a natural process that we have. It's not an engineered process, which makes it unique in itself too. The diversity of our community is natural, and it provides us with a great many opportunities to learn in a profound and methodical way how others think, feel, speak, and live. And in a city like Miami, we have no choice but be part of and inhabit the world of the other. That's very important for this program, to create that kind of a paradise, a paradigm that will allow us to see each other, really see each other, understand each other, and more importantly, to be able to listen to each other. You know, very often I'm asked, what is it that attracted me to FIU, and why do I enjoy teaching at FIU so much? And my answer is very simple. When I taught at other universities, but I never experienced what I experienced in FIU. When I walk into a classroom at FIU, I have many students, but I have as many stories as I have students. Sure.
I think Professor Milbauer's slip there a second ago was very telling, because what he's saying is, and I would happen to agree with him, that in the best moments in our classrooms, it's not a paradigm. Sorry, Michelle. It's not just a paradigm, but in fact, momentarily sometimes, at least for me, I venture to say for Dr. Milbauer as well, a slice of paradise regained, that give and take between professors and students, students and students, exploring this literature and these ideas together. So
Yeah.
I think saying paradise there, although that's not the word you meant, is actually very fitting. Because of course one thing that we do in exile studies constantly is ask, what does it mean to have lost paradise? I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Maybe if there is time, I'll give you another quote from Kundera, the Milan Kundera, the Czech writer, who we study in our classes, but let's leave it for later. As I continued my presentation to the chair, he kept nodding, and I said, okay, I see that my sail is going really well. So I told him, well, let me give you some more evidence and tell you what is it that we are going to teach in these classes. And I told him that we can read works from antiquity, and we can read works from different continents, Europe and Asia and other places. I told him that when we read the poetry of Exile by Ovid, I know you are reading it in Dr. Sutton's class, we explore the rancor and bitterness of exiled artists, the exiled artist experience as they are banished from their own mother tongue by a capricious emperor. There is not much ideology there. The story is very interesting behind Ovid's banishment, but one person can make a big difference in the destiny of someone else. Vladimir Nabokov's novel Mary will expose, I told Dr. Sutton, our students to the tragedy of exile resulting from upheavals of the Russian Revolution, and in fact a social order informed by principles of ends justifying the means. By closely following the plight of a child separated from the parents in Aaron Appelfeld's Tsili, Aaron Appelfeld is a child survivor originally from Romania and became a major writer in Israel. The students will be introduced to what can only be described as the ultimate manifestation of exile, the Holocaust, that is. There is no more of a stark example what exile is, from self to smoke. Is there anything else to say about that? The students will have a chance to examine the symbiotic relationship between exile and return, echoed in biblical text or explored in biblical text, but also echoed in Milan Kundera's work, Novel Ignorance. Cristina Garcia's highly acclaimed novel, Dreaming in Cuban, offers a view of the children who inherit the burdens of exile. from their forcefully displaced parents, while Kincaid's Lucy exposes the consequences of colonialism and the seductive pleasures of exile. These large literary canvases will be paired with shorter works of literature produced not necessarily by exiled writers. And two works that my students know I like to teach is Bernard Malamud's The German Refugee and Flannery O'Connor's The Displaced Person. The ideas drawn from these texts kind of frame the mission of exile studies. In The German Refugee, the main character, a young student who comes in touch with refugees, exiles from Nazi Germany, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. As he comes in touch with them, he is very innocent. He does it because he needs to make some money. But he says what happens as a result of coming in touch with these great people is that you get educated yourself. You get an education in a time of crisis. And Flannery O'Connor's main character, Mrs. McIntyre, in The Displaced Person, she is the owner of a farm in Milledgeville in Virginia. When she is first welcoming a family, the Guzhaks, who after the Second World War became displaced persons people, and they come to the farm, but the farm and their relationship don't go together really. It's a complicated story, and Mrs. McIntyre slowly, from being more hospitable, becomes more alienated from these people. But as the lives of the Guzhaks is destroyed, so is the farm being destroyed. And finally, Mrs. McIntyre has to admit that these people, in biblical terms, came to redeem her, that their main thrust, the main idea behind having them there is for her and others to engage, again in a biblical term, into cheshbon hanefesh, that is accounting of a soul. Coming in touch with exile literature, you hold a mirror in front of yourself and you ask yourself very simply, am I hospitable? Do I understand? Can I listen attentively to these people? Do I have the empathy for their faith? And so on. So these are the kinds of things that the texts in exile studies help us to understand.
If I may, I just started Dante's Inferno this morning with my exile studies students. And those are exactly the questions I said the text poses. Are we hospitable? How do we interact with the other? Do we recognize the other? Etc.
Yeah, these are important questions. I can go on in this way, but I looked at Dr. Sutton as I was presenting my case, and he looked at me and I saw in his eyes, you are selling it too hard. I already bought it halfway your presentation. And basically he says, Asher, let's just go and do it. It's important. It's more than important. It's crucial to study these kinds of things in the age of globalization and diversification. It's absolutely important for us, significant for us, to remain the kind of human beings we imagine ourselves to be, rather than what we sometimes are. So, one second. So, what we are going to see in the presentations, because that was another thing I told Dr. Sutton, that the exile has global reach. And if we just isolate ourselves in an academic community, we are not doing the kind of service we need to do. We have to reach out to other scholars, to other entities, to other university divisions, and so on. Dr. Sutton.
If I may, what I'd like to do, because I want to present some slides to you, tell you a little story of what has unfolded since Dr. Milbauer sold me on this program, and then open up to you and your questions for us that you may have from our presentation. Actually, let me go back to this for a moment. The image there on the right is of a painting by the local Cuban American artist Umberto Calzada. Very poignant image for exile studies of the gateway of a liminal threshold of something seen beyond. The three texts that are in the middle there are foundational. This is, after all, the brochure that Dr. Milbauer created for the program. Psalm 137 and the text from Emma Lazarus that came along with the gift of the Statue of Liberty. And then a quote from Elie Wiesel from one of his post-Holocaust works, Souls on Fire. Forgetfulness lies at the root of exile, just as remembrance lies at the root of deliverance. There's a text here, which if we had 3 hours, but you did not come here for a 3-hour presentation, but we could deliver the text here of the pamphlet, which literally enfolds the ideas that Dr. Milbauer had when he created this program. Oh, there we go. I'm going to come back to this perhaps. We have, in Exile Studies, with the support of the English department and the College of Arts and Sciences and the Green School and the Honors College and partners in the community such as the Betsy South Beach Hotel, we have put on a number of lectures and public appearances by global figures from all over the world who have come to Miami, come to FIU to speak to our students, speak to our community, and be with our students and share their ideas. Exile Studies brings the globe to FIU. Our first major speaker, writer in residence who was here for a month, thanks to the generous hospitality of our friends and partners at the Betsy South Beach, was Jen Hove, an exiled Zimbabwean poet, then living the remainder of his too short life in Norway. And he came to Miami his second time here. He had been here previously a few years before as part of the City of Refuge program run by, among others, Miami-Dade College and Books and Books. But we brought him here a second time. He met with students, he taught classes, he delivered lectures that were at once witty and deeply personal. But because they were so open and generous, all of our students, all of our faculty were sort of brought into his own storytelling coming out of his life in Zimbabwe, but recalled and remembered from Norway. He left his wife and his children as a political exile. And he died much too young, about 3 or 4 years ago. Otherwise, we would have had him back any number of times. Dear friend, Jen Hove. A couple of years later, under Dr. Milbauer's leadership, with my support and the support of any number of other entities at FIU, including our Center for the Humanities, at that time directed by Professor Michael Gillespie, we were able to convince the Coral Gables Museum to exhibit for 4 months this exhibition on the hospitality given German and other Holocaust Jewish survivors, given to them by historically black colleges and universities. These brilliant men and women and creatives who, if they survived, fled for their lives to the United States, found shelter at HBCUs, not at the Columbias and Yales and Harvards and FIUs, but at the Florida Memorials and the Howards and the Hamptons and the Bethune-Cookmans of the American South. What a story. And this exhibition told that story through film and archives and all sorts of material culture that was on exhibit for 4 months in the fall of 2015. And this was sort of spearheaded by our Exile Studies program. We had a number of students go to Coral Gables to see that exhibit. We brought all kinds of programming here to FIU. And this was our opening. I just want to show you a couple of shots because, again, they tell a story. This was at the time the president of Florida Memorial. She's moved on. I'm not sure where she is, but she's moved up the pecking order, I believe, of colleges. Incredible young woman who at that time was leading Miami's HBCU. And she came to talk about her own education and her own sort of impact of this story on her life. Does this matter in a community?
Her name is, we need names.
Yes.
Rosalyn Clark Artis.
Thank you. Dr. Artis. Several of you will recognize this figure. Still, our school superintendent, no longer your boss. But a man, obviously, of great renown and vision in our community. And why was he there at our opening? Because he saw the power of this story and the necessity of telling this story as widely as possible in the schools. And so, indeed, we ran a couple of professional development programs for students, for faculty in MDCPS, just asking the question, how can this story, how can this slice of history that folks don't know about, how can it be related and shared in our local schools, where so often students of color may be studying with Jewish students and white students and Hispanic students. Exile Studies is a program that's global but also local and grows naturally out of the soil of Miami. Our own president, President Rosenberg, was also at this event. We don't have a picture of him speaking, but very moving. The portrait that you see there is President Rosenberg's mother. And he talked about her own history as a survivor, as a Holocaust survivor. So the impact of this exhibition was huge. It also was huge because of this. And I'm going to let Dr. Milbauer talk about this particular shot.
I want to, with your permission, to go back for a second. You can leave the picture, that's all.
This one?
Yeah, you can leave that. But if you look at the flyer, which is a big flyer for the swastika, beyond swastika and Jim Crow, there is a text in reading our sponsors there. Bringing that exhibit here was a dream of mine for many years. The exhibit first appeared and was curated at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. And for me, it was a powerful story because it dealt with two marginalized communities and more, the Jewish people and the Afro-American people, dealt with issues that are absolutely important to making sure that we survive with dignity, and that issues of hospitality. It's important to know that those professors from Europe, they were either kicked out or they left, and the only way they could leave if an American university would provide them with a labor certificate allowing them to come and work here. But you needed a university. Needless to say, there was enough prejudice, anti-Semitism at the time, and many universities would not extend that kind of hospitality to these wretched people who looked to survive. And it was black colleges, historically black colleges, who opened their doors. And what I wanted to underscore, that this moment in history tells us a great deal about intellectual reciprocity and generosity and hospitality and the gratitude on both sides, the professors and the students and the colleges themselves. So it was a very important moment for us to bring this exhibit. Furthermore, I want also to tell you, and Dr. Sutton said, basically implying it takes a village. Yes, Dr. Sutton, Dr. Gillespie, and later on, Dr. Luzinska and Heather Russell and our faculty, they became partners. And they became partners because they understood the significance of this program. And when we went around the university campus to ask for funds, to ask for support, if you look again at it, not now, Dr. Sutton, but look again when you have a chance at the sponsors, they came from all over at the university and outside too. And Dr. Sutton talked about Chenjere Hove from Zimbabwe. That was also marked by something which is important. The community, particularly the Betsy South Beach Hotel, recognized the importance of our endeavor, our mission, and together we established a writer-scholar residency. As a matter of fact, Dr. Sutton himself became a resident when his tenure as chair came to completion. They provide the people who come from wherever they come, all over the world, with a week-long stay at the hotel in the writer's room, a writer's room dedicated to their father who was a poet. So these are very important kind of issues that we are talking about, but these are practical steps to make the relevance of the program and the works that we are reading so much more significant and relevant. Dr. Sutton, go ahead.
So I'm going to I'm going to try to move through these slides quickly.
Right.
You'll see a theme here. This is Dr. Milbauer and 4 now alums who are currently students. One is a graduate student finishing up her PhD at the University of Michigan. We have the director of IT at Miami Springs, double alum in English and in both BA and MA, and now a teacher of Exile Studies at MDC, who may in fact be watching this right now, and several of his students. Now a co-worker, if you will, a colleague in the field of Exile Studies, and other wonderful then students, now alumni. Just want to push forward quickly so you can see some of the other programming. We had Edgewood Danticat, the noted Haitian-American author, speak. Susanna Oswath, a survivor of the Holocaust in Hungary, came to FIU to talk about her childhood and her memories. David Markish, who delivered his talk in his Russian, native Russian, now an Israeli citizen. His lecture was given in Russian and translated on the spot by my colleague, Dr. Milbauer. An amazing evening for all sorts of reasons. Monika Zagostova from the Czech Republic, then living in Barcelona, I believe still living in Barcelona. Ambassador Abena Busia, who was the mentor of our colleague, chair, now dean, and I believe just announced earlier today, right as I was coming here, but a further promotion for our dear friend, Dr. Heather Russell. Abena Busia was her mentor. He is a Ghanaian poet with a complicated and fascinating childhood and history of all of her own, of living in and coming to terms with Ghana, from both Ghana and London. Not too recently, right before the pandemic shut this place down, in March of 2020, or I believe February of 2020, Mamta Chaudhry, an Indian who spoke of her own time in Paris and and had written a book about her, an imaginative book. You'll be able to describe it better, but definitely sort of a piece of exilic literature set in Paris. And a few slides here from various events, and you'll see a theme. Notice that the young woman speaking is a young woman, not us, you. Surrounded by faculty, other students, but asking questions. Same. This is the only slide with me in it. Dr. Milbauer sent many others, and I was just like getting rid of all of them, but this one snuck in. But actually, now that we were looking at these yesterday, this is perfect. We're giving the microphone, giving you voice in this program to ask your own questions of faculty and experts whom we might bring to campus. Monika Zagustova and one of our students, one-on-one. That's what global learning is all about. If you can't do it abroad, we'll bring it to you here through Exile Studies. That's it. That captures it. Right there. This captures it too. This is a shot of our book that Dr. Milbauer and I published a year ago in July 2020. That is a collection of essays. All of the people that we just showed you in the slides, and many, many more, wrote essays for that book. Fresh, brand new essays. So we have an essay on the nature of the Jewish people and the Jewish condition as the paradigm of the exilic nation. There's an essay on Ovid and Virgil and exile. Yours truly wrote an essay on Shakespeare and exile. We have essays on Joyce by our own Dr. Gillespie, and on Salman Rushdie by a close friend of our program, and on, but Dr. Ambassador Busia has an essay there, and so does Professor Oswath. Many of the speakers then rewrote their lectures in fresh, extended, new essays, published as part of our book. And the book is itself, at least for me, a gift of hospitality that I accepted from my colleague who made this presentation to me 10 years ago or 12 years ago. I've got this great idea. come be part of it. Come join me. Come along for the ride and let's see where this goes with our students. And one place it's gone is this publication, because of course that is what faculty are called to do, to teach and to publish, to send their ideas out into the world. Now, that book is a banquet itself of ideas that represent the program we've just told you about. Professor Hove is in there. He had died before we were working on this book, but we made sure to insert him and make his presence felt, as are our friends at the South Beach Hotel and so many of our colleagues. This book is sort of the natural outgrowth of our program. So if I had to show you 2 slides that represent the global nature, and look, the word global is in our title. What is Exile Studies? It's that and the friendship that led to that. And it's this. It's our students learning these ideas, being given the language, and then conversing with experts from the Czech Republic or Hungary or Zimbabwe. It is a program for our times.
It sure is. I might
We have
just
6 minutes.
make a comment because I think it's very appropriate here, talking about the book. Our book ends with a long, long interview that we have done with the Cuban-American, highly, highly acclaimed artist, Umberto Calzada. We interviewed him for 3 or 4 months, and the interview is published as the last word in the book, so to speak. So we started with his painting on the brochure.
And you can see it there in the
Right.
bottom left-hand corner.
Right. We started with the painting on the brochure, and it's a threshold representing criminality. Uwe de Arago, another dear friend of the program, once defined the difference between exile and immigrant. The exile always looks back, the immigrant looks forward. Here you have a threshold, and this is a typical painting by Calzada. You don't forget what is over there, but you also understand that you have to go beyond. You have to live now. He is a dear friend of the program, contributed the picture to us, and remained a friend through all this time. And it was very appropriate that we end the book with his interview. This is our 18th essay, right? And there is, I can't help but mention, there is a symbolic kind of an implication there, although it unintended. 18, the number 18 in Hebrew translates into life, chai, chaim. So, transcending exile is life. Teaching our student is life. Creating programs like these celebrate life. So it was appropriate for us to have the last essay, the interview we've done with Calzada, at the very end of the book, kind of summing up of it, and celebrating the Cuban community here, the American Cuban community.
By the way, I love that slide.
Hmm?
I love all of these slides, but that one is so Miami.
Yes.
The young woman who I mentioned is now at the University of Michigan. Brazilian. All right, so strictly speaking, not Hispanic.
Her name is Stanev.
Stanev.
And
Russian Brazilian, correct?
Russian Brazilian,
Okay.
right.
And then I do not know the other 4 people, but
Well,
just
there is David Frisch there.
is that David Frisch?
Right, also a
Okay.
graduate.
Yeah.
So these are graduates of the Exile Studies program too. One thing that is important for you to understand that involvement of the students is very important to us. It's for them basically. And we had, what you see in the slides, there's just a really small sampling of what we are doing. We had conferences and symposia where students were presenters along with the professors. Like Ms. Stanev, who is now finishing her doctorate, she was a presenter at a panel that featured another writer we brought from Romania, a Romanian writer, Mr. Mania, Norman Mania, whose essay we also have there. So we paired our students' presentations with presentations of professional writers and critics. And I think that did not go unnoticed by the community at large.
I know we're almost out of time, but do we have time for a couple of questions?
I think if people want to ask questions, I think if you can pick up your lunch on the way out if you don't have time, but if you'd like to stay, I definitely, does anybody have any questions?
Can I just, if you don't have any questions, if you are not currently in Exile Studies, that's okay. I know FIU students are very busy and you have lots of different demands on your time. But if anything that Dr. Milbauer or myself has said today is of interest to you and you'd like to know more about the program, please follow up with me afterward, and I'll be happy to text you, email you. My students go, yeah, he means it when he says text you. Be careful. Email me, it's probably safer. And we'll, yeah, Nick's laughing very hard. I will be happy to have a conversation with you about the program, about your interests, see where you're at, and if it might be right for you. We didn't have the opportunity to really discuss the certificate program. It's 6 courses, and 2 foundational courses in literature, and another literature elective, an arts and or humanities elective, a social sciences elective, and then your 6th course, or the final capstone, is an independent study, which could be in literature, but it could be in a field and done with a professor outside of literature as well. This is Dr. Milbauer's program. He's developed it. He is the founding director. But as Anna said earlier, he's on sabbatical this year, so I've stepped in through next August to do the best I can to keep everything moving forward, which is why I'm saying come to me now if you want to know more. And that way I can tell Dr. Milbauer when he comes back next August, look who we found from our presentation. Let me introduce you to this young man who I saw nodding his head. It's all right. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. But if there are any of you who would like to know more, feel free to follow up with me. Can I just throw out my email? Sutton J, SUTTONJ @fiu.edu. I'll be happy to engage in a conversation with you and tell you more about this really lovely, important, vital program for our times that slides so well, embeds itself so well in the larger global learning mission of the institution that we all live and work in. So thank you.
So on behalf of the Office of Global Learning Initiatives and Tuesday Times Roundtable, thank you so much, Dr. Milbauer and Dr. Sutton. If you can't get a hold of Dr. Sutton and you want more information, we know how to get a hold of him, so you can contact us at Global Learning. One quick pitch, because we do not have time for questions. If anybody is interested in doing not-so-scary yoga through the Office of Global Learning Initiatives and the Global Learning Medallion Kids, we will be doing that next Wednesday. I will be frightening, because I will be doing the yoga, and it will scare all of you, but that is not because of my costume. Please, if you're interested, please contact us at Go Global, and you can have all the details and sign up for it there. So thank you so much for attending, everyone, and we'll see you again. Sorry.
Can I just say one sentence?
Absolutely, go ahead.
About the curriculum of the program. Dr. Sutton will talk to you individually, but I want you to remember one simple thing, that some of the courses that you have already taken might be grandfathered into the program. So it's very, that is, if you have taken the history of ideas, which is a art humanities requirement, that course is grandfathered. So you already have 3 credits right there of the 18. And don't think that, well, it will take me a long time to do the 18 credits. You might be halfway through, as some of our students have realized. So talk to Dr. Sutton this year. And the second thing that I want to say is Dr. Sutton calls himself the acting director of the program for the year. He's been acting director for many years now, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Sutton for the goodwill, for what I learned from you. Your erudition is insurpassable, and your writing is always beautiful and meaningful. So thank you for the friendship.
Thank you very much. And of course, right back at you. See, we really like each other in this program. So tell me when we're done, Michelle. We're off? Okay.